Hello and welcome to Talk a Good Games match preview of Crystal Palace against West Ham United. Both sides beaten on the opening day of the Premier League. Gonzo, Crystal Palace, bit of a bad week for them. Lost against Brentford. Andersen's off to Fulham. Newcastle are trying to get Guéhi. Possibly not looking too good to be a Palace fan right now.
No, I've got to be honest with you. Look, I've got sympathy for them, actually, because they were close last season. When they appointed Glasner, I thought they were incredible. One of possibly the best teams to watch in the Premier League once they appointed him. One of the form teams, with these however many points they picked up, they were up there, a top 4 team with their points accumulated once he joined, something like that anyway. And I can't remember who I said it to, but I might have even said it on a video, and I said that they won't be allowed to do this. And it's not like I'm some big conspiracy theory, like, you know, whatever, the Illuminati are going to stop them progressing. But they're just going to be picked apart. And I want revenge on Palace for them basically pulling our pants down. I want to beat Crystal Palace. But I also want to see, and I know they're rivals, clubs like Crystal Palace, clubs like Brighton, clubs like Brentford who beat them. I want to see the end of their project. I want to know that they can do it because I think it's important for West Ham. And I think particularly in light of, you know, PSR and FFP, I like to know that there's a route forward for these clubs to do it. And as long, obviously I wanted to finish above them, but I was actually intrigued to see what Glasner could have done this season. And maybe he'll go on and maybe he'll do something, but I wouldn't mind betting that he's probably thinking, oh man, I was building something here. I had something good. You know, it's a case of add 2 more to what you were doing, 2 more players to what you were doing. And, you know, Crystal Palace were probably thinking, if we had 2 more players and keep who we got, we might be able to make Europe this season. And bang, it pulls the rug out from underneath them. As you say, Guéhi, Andersen, both of whom might not face us at the weekend. And obviously, Elise just did a huge loss. It's just a huge, huge loss. He was unplayable at times last season. We always struggled against him. Yeah, I do. I must be honest. I do worry that it symbolises what's happening in Crystal Palace. Symbolises this move to everyone doing everything they can to ensure the top clubs always thrive. And it's you know, I'm not saying they're going to struggle, but that's made it very, very hard for them.
The thing is, in regards to Andersen, it's not even a top club coming in and taking their player with the greatest of respect to Fulham. You know, it's a sideways move, in my opinion. Yeah. You know, Palace generally have finished above Fulham most occasions. You know, last season, I think Fulham finished above them. But I think it's a fair expectation that maybe Palace would have edged ahead of the 2 this season. Palace would have been above them. So I think Andersen going there is a bit of a sideways one. I think Elise, there's nothing they could do there. And I think Glasner would be expecting to lose Elise this summer with the release clause. And he only signed that contract to have that release clause. If anything, I think he did well and was kind to Palace to not go to Chelsea and say, well, I'll sign a new contract with an increased fee so you get more money for me next summer. So he was always going. I say done well to hold on to Eze. It was out of their hands as well because of his release clause, which is expired now. But I think they can go, right, okay, that's one player that should be here post-transfer deadline. Wharton, luckily, nobody's come in for him because he's had an incredible 6 months at Crystal Palace. And I think it's fair to expect next summer some teams might be looking at him this season and say, right, is he ready for a Man City and Arsenal or whatever? I think the answer so far is yes, but only 6 months in the Premier League. Let's see you do over the next 12 months. So next summer, I think they might be fending off interest for him as well. But their centre-backs, I think Guéhi, because he was always linked to Newcastle quite early on, and they've been, you know, low balling, they've been taking a leaf out of the David Sullivan book with low bids for him. That's not ideal. But Andersen going as well, to lose both of your centre-backs is all that's left is Wharton and Eze. Now, listen, I think they've got other great players in key positions. We'll get on to those, but in terms of like high profile big ticket ones, and I just look at them, I think if I was a Palace fan, I think I'd be fuming right now. The lack of investment at the club right now, the lack of players coming in. They've spent some money, but they're not big signings like you would expect. And you're sitting there thinking, well, when are they going to do something? And you're right. If Palace fans coming out of last season was thinking, brilliant. If we only lose Elise, but we can add 2 to 3 good players to the squad, we've got a fantastic team. And there's no reason they couldn't have signed Kamada, even if they didn't lose Elise, because he was a free transfer. So they must have been so excited. I don't know how Palace fans are feeling right now, but I wouldn't be surprised they're pretty deflated. Getting beat by Brentford, Andersen's off, Guéhi's likely off. And while it's positive they held on to Eze, it's maybe quite hard to cling to that positivity right now. I think, well, bloody hell, but what else? You don't want to become a Zaha, which is a one-man attacking team to some extent. Mateta's not signed a new contract with them yet either. So they finally get a tune out of their striker, and he's refusing to commit his future. So surely, Gonzo, they've got to be busy in the last week of the transfer window.
Well, you'd think so. I not literally, but I found myself stuck in the car. I believe it. When was it? It was on Sunday. Found myself stuck in a car on Sunday with Steve Parish, who did an extended interview on TalkSport, and I was driving up to Birmingham, as you know, and he was on there for a long. He was on there for most of the journey to Birmingham. Actually, very good, very engaging. I like the sound of him, like the cut of his jib. You would think so. I think if you're a Palace fan, you'd certainly think that he was going to do something. They'll be fully aware of it. I do think they're, his fingers on the pulse, but I don't know the exact details. Also alluding to it, one of their investments, one of their big shareholders, looks like he might be off as well because of the multi-club rule. I sort of switched off at that point to be fair and listen to a bit of music. But I think they've got a lot of stuff, a lot of business to be doing, and it just shows you the fine lines. There was a point last season I was terrified of Crystal Palace as a West Ham fan. I was terrified of the way they were, the way they beat us, and what they could potentially do. We didn't have a manager. Moyes was going, this is, they could flip it. And we were European champions, for goodness sake. And you think, how quickly can that flip? But it goes the other way, to go from that to a case of, I'm looking at it now, I don't know what to expect from Palace. They could thrive or they could struggle. And football is a fickle old business.
Yeah, I think they'll bring in a few players. One thing I would say in terms of positivity towards Crystal Palace is Guéhi's not gone yet, and there's no guarantee he will join Newcastle because they've made, 3-4 bids for him right now, and it's gotten not near the total. So there is a small chance they'll hold on to him, and I think it's a fair chance. And if they do sell him, they're going to get 60, 70 million for him as well. So it's a substantial amount of cash coming in. So they do have a lot of money to play with, you'd imagine, and they have purchased wisely in the last couple of seasons. Like, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Is it Muniz, the right wing back? I think he's been excellent since he's come in. I never heard of him before he rocked up at Crystal Palace, but I think he's been absolutely fantastic. So they've got another couple of signings like that in them, then sure. But yeah, they've got to be busy. What do you expect from them this season? And I know obviously it's hard to tell considering there's still a week of the transfer window to go. But at this point, what are you thinking?
Well, it switched. I expected them to challenge. End of last season, I expected them to challenge for Europe, and I probably would have expected them to finish above West Ham. Now I expect them to avoid relegation. Which I do, and I'm not saying they're going to be in the relegation fight. My expectancy is that they will avoid relegation. I would anticipate them finish 13th or something like that.
I was going to say, well, in that case, I expect Man City to avoid relegation as well. We're playing that game.
Good prediction. I'm not going to give you very good odds for it, by the way, but yeah, you can place that bet if you want.
Yeah, I'm going to say City and Arsenal both avoid relegation.
Yeah,
for Palace, I still think they'll be in and around mid-table. Listen, regardless of the players, Glasner is still a really good coach. They got beat by Brentford. I thought they played okay, to be fair, Crystal Palace. They were a bit open and Brentford found it easy to counter-attack against them. However, there was obviously the referee issue regarding Eze's free kick, and they had a couple of other opportunities, Palace, that it just did not take. And I feel like the Brentford opener came against the run of play a little bit. I thought Palace looked quite comfortable in that game, but yeah, ended up losing. Decore's set to come back. Glasner's obviously not had Decore because he's been injured all this time. He's back now. So it's almost like a new signing for Glasner himself. So I think they'll be more than fine. I think we'll continue to see really good football from Crystal Palace. And I think they might, the 13th may be correct. I imagine 13, 12, 11, somewhere in and around there. I think they'll be comfortable. and possibly one of those teams that you look at and think, cup team. There's a lot of Premier League teams. Now, I include West Ham in this, by the way. You look at it and think, you've got to go all out for a cup. You have to go and try and win one of those 2 domestic cups, because you might get European football, but it's maybe a bit of a long shot. You're not going to get relegated. You should be comfortable this season. So with that in mind, go and try and win the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup. And I'd certainly put Crystal Palace in there as well. Last question on Palace. As always, we've mentioned them a couple of times already for different reasons, but players you admire?
Yeah, I thought Munoz was their best player against Brentford, actually. It's funny you mentioned him. Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned them, mate. At the risk of talking about players we've already mentioned, why don't we just mention Mitchell? I think I'll mention Mitchell. I think he's a good left back, and you look at what happened with England at the summer. Yeah, all right. Look, ultimately, you would look at it from an outsider. I think, what are you injured about, mate? Look, England did really well, but for anyone that watched England with any detail, you'd suggest we had a problem in terms of the squad composition at left back with that. So I think he's a good player, and I'm not saying he's a well beater, but he's probably found himself a little bit unlucky not to feature in that squad. Bearing in mind we didn't have a left back until very late in the competition for a few minutes, really. So yeah, good player.
Wharton, I think, is an absolutely fantastic footballer. It's one of those players you're always disappointed when a rival picks them up. And when he went to Palace, I wouldn't have minded him at West Ham. Then when you see him at Crystal Palace, I definitely wouldn't have minded him at West Ham. You become a little bit more gutted that for whatever reason your team didn't go get him. And as he's just a sensational footballer, I thought he looked really good against Brentford at times. Not the perfect performance from him, but he's had a very short pre-season because of England's tournament, not necessarily his tournament, but England's tournament. I think he's just a wonderful player, and I think Palace can come out the window, assuming he remains there. Glad they've still got him, because I think you'd be forgiven for expecting him to leave this summer, as well as at least saying perhaps Guéhi as well. But they've got an entertaining player there that's capable of producing moments of magic, match-winning moments as well throughout the season. And they've always had players like that, Crystal Palace. And as I said, losing Elise is a blow. But if Elise was their only incredible attacking player, I think it would hurt more. But I think Eze must give them a bit of comfort, which is all right. It's not ideal we've lost him, but we've still got this guy, and I expect big things from him this season. Right, moving on to West Ham. But before we do, just one point in direction of this video sponsors, Match Bingo. They are sticking with us for the first few months of this season. We've got a promotion for you this weekend. If you purchase 3 cards for the Crystal Palace West Ham game at £2 a piece, obviously it costs you £6, you get 2 cards free. So 5 for the price of 3. There you go. Glad that worked. I just made it up on the spot. There you go. 5 for the price of 3. There you go.
Oh, sneaky.
Anyway, what is Match Bingo? It's combining bingo with this game. You get 15 things you need to happen, 6 Crystal Palace things, 6 West Ham things, and 3 things to occur in the match as well. It pays out for the first line, second line, as well as the full house. Plus, there's a bonus pot as well for anybody else that hits the full house, but they were not first. So you can win up to £100 on this game. Well, saying that, you can win more. You could be the first one to get the first line, second line, and full house, and you can win £275 that will give you in total. To download the app, please use the link in the description below. Please do use that link so they know you come from Hammers Chat. It is a gambling app, so please do gamble responsibly, 18 plus and over. But you fancy adding a little bit more excitement to the game on Saturday afternoon, get signed up to Match Bingo and get your 5 cards for the price of 3. Gonzo, in terms of team news, it's looking pretty healthy. There's a bit of a question mark over Edson Alvarez because of Fabrizio Romano's naughty tweet, but I think it's maybe fair to suggest he's not fit for this one. Back in training, yes, but fit for this game, no. Is that fair?
I think so. Because what I mean is Romano's correct and everyone else is lying, and it's just I think there's just too many. It sounds a bit too conspiratorial for me.
Alvarez has put up pictures himself on social media and training, but it's very much with, throwing the gym ball backwards and forwards with someone. So that's not somebody that's fit and ready to go. No,
but the club tweeted a picture of him yesterday as well, which I thought, what are you doing? What's going on there? And it was like a Mexican themed tweet. I didn't know what was going on there. So it's easy to look at this and read too much into it. I'm not factoring him into my team. That's for sure. So, so I think we'll proceed with everybody else apart from him, really, Gio.
Just a reminder, there's a team myself and Gonzo want to see, not the team that we think Lopetegui shall play. So with that in mind, Gonzo, talk me through your goalkeeper and defence, please.
Well, I am going with, for this game, I am going with Areola in goal. I am drafting in Mr. Wan-Bissaka to give us the full force on that right-hand side. I think it's probably time. I'm probably going to do something a little bit controversial now. Not that. I'm not putting Danny Ings at centre back. It's not that controversial, to be fair. I'm going to play a centre.
Is it more controversial than Crystal Palace not getting relegated? Because that was a little bit wild.
Well, I said 13th. I just said they were going to be no chance of getting relegated. So I just think their ambitions might have switched somewhat, but not full survival mode. But that was quite controversial. You can, don't use that as a bloody headline, by the way. Don't use that as the clickbait. West Ham fan tips Eagles to be relegated. Yeah, I know.
Continue. What's your controversial pick?
Mavropanos. I'm going to play Mavropanos there. So just 2 reasons. I think he played well in a Villa game, and I'm not in any hurry. Look, ultimately, we all know what the back line is going to be. I think change one component part at a time, quite possibly. So RB play. It's already changed with Kilman in there. I think. Let's have Mavropanos next to Kilman. Let's play Wan-Bissaka. We'll bring Todibo in, possibly for the game after. And obviously Emerson playing at left back.
I get it. I do get it. I'm not going to say I don't understand. I get why you keep Mavropanos because I agree. I thought you had a good game against Aston Villa. However, I would change him for the reasons you've just said as to why you wouldn't change it. So I would stick with Emerson and Kilman on the left, but on the right-hand side, I'd bring in Wan-Bissaka and Todibo. And you said you'd only change one player at a time. Well, I'd actually change both because if you bring in Wan-Bissaka now and then change it to Todibo the next game, Wan-Bissaka's got 2 different partners in 2 different games, whereas I'd actually rather he hits the ground running with an understanding play next to Todibo in this game because obviously the next one's Manchester City, so it's going to get a little bit tougher for them. So Wan-Bissaka and Todibo in for me, and Soufal deserves to drop to the bench, whereas Mavropanos a little bit harsh. But yeah, like you said, this is clearly the sort of long-term defence at West Ham. I understand why he didn't do it against Aston Villa. Fitness, late to join pre-season, etc. Those excuses aren't applicable here as far as I'm concerned. They've had an additional week. Todibo's been at the club for 2 weeks when we take on Crystal Palace. That's long enough as far as I'm concerned. Now, moving into... this is definitely the meaty topic and the one that loads of people are going to have different answers for.
Yeah.
What's your central midfield looking like?
Well, I'm going to go for an old Velcro feet to play in central midfield, even though, hopefully he's taken some of that off and he can get a little bit quicker. But I think he's a good player. I really do. I think some of it was pace. I'll talk about Rodriguez, just to old treacle toes himself, just in case you didn't know. We thought he was a little bit slower than it had said in the catalogue. And I am obsessed with pace in football, so let's just get that right as well. So pay no attention to me. I think some of it might be fitness as well. I think it's not just outright speed. I think there's a sharpness to the Premier League. I think once he gets up to there, I do think he's a damn fine player. Actually, I think he's going to be good. So I would play him. Now we get into the realms of having praised Thomas Souček for a few days. We're in, and this is why I was at pains, as I know you were too, to separate what you want to see with what you've actually seen. Okay. Once you see Thomas Souček and you realise that he wasn't playing in central midfield in the last game and you appraise him as a battering ram in a box, you realise he did his job. And I thought he did his job really well. I thought he was the biggest goal threat to Aston Villa. That being said, I don't want to see it. Okay? I don't want to see that role. I feel we're sacrificing something in central midfield. I don't want to sacrifice something in central midfield. So actually, I'm at 6s and 7s here. I think I'm going to drop Lucas Paquetá back right next to Rodriguez, which is where he was sort of playing a lot of the time anyway, but I'm going to do it in a more official capacity. I'd do that, or I'd play Ward-Prowse there, but I'm going because I'm dropping Souček despite his battering ram sort of performance. So I'll go with Rodriguez and I'll go with Lucas Paquetá and a double in the middle.
I think that'd be the most popular selection, but I'm going to go Ward-Prowse next to Rodriguez. I think Crystal Palace like to play between the lines, as they call it, that ball in between your midfielders in front of your defence. So Eze and Kamada will be sort of number 10s, playing either side of Mateta, but a little bit deeper as well. And they become incredibly difficult to mark, really, because your central midfielders are trying to face up to Wharton and Hughes or Decore. One of them will start next to Wharton, but regardless, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. They'll be willing to put that ball between your central midfielders into the feet of Eze and Kamada. And the centre-backs can't mark them because obviously Mateta's buzzing about there as well. And usually he's quite central and in between centre-backs. So it becomes a really difficult proposition as to who to mark them. And this is what tore us apart at Selhurst Park last season, because our fullbacks didn't want to come in and mark them. The wing-backs were getting forward. So it was almost like we had an extra player at wide, but Crystal Palace's extra players were in central. And we had absolutely no idea on how to defend against them. And I'm concerned as to what Lopetegui is going to do for this one, because I thought we were very open in midfield against Aston Villa. I thought it was quite easy to run through our midfield, quite frankly. And if the same's allowed to happen on Saturday, I think we will get punished more. So I'd go Ward-Prowse. I think he's not as defensively as good as Thomas Souček, but I don't want Ward-Prowse crashing into the box at the end. I just want him to sit next to Rodriguez, have that, your favourite phrase, that double pivot in midfield rather than a singular one. I'd rather have to beef up the midfield a little bit, have Ward-Prowse a bit more disciplined, a bit more restricted next to Rodriguez, and hopefully the attackers can do the attacking part of it. Moving on to those attackers, I've got a feeling I know what you're going to do now because you've used up Paqueta in central midfield, but talk me through it anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jarrod Bowen on the right, Mohamed Kudus centrally, and Somerville playing on the left-hand side. We'll be excited to see him off the back of his trophy collection for the Championship Player of the Season. They would be my attacking trio behind the striker.
Bowen on the right, Kudus on the 10 for me, and Paqueta over on that left-hand side for reasons I've covered many times. I think Paqueta gets the best out of Emerson. I think Paqueta's all right over on the left, and I just want to see Kudus in the middle. I get why, Somerville looked bright when he came on, but if we need a goal, you've got to do a sub. You've got to bring Thomas Souček on. That's all I'm saying. He's your him and possibly Antonio would be your two you've got to bring on. But that striker position, then Antonio had a bit of a stinker, I think, against Aston Villa. So are you sticking with him, or are you twisting and bringing in our German international striker?
Oh yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to bring in the Fullkrug because I think when you have, or you're getting close to this squad that Lopetegui wants, which is he's professed 2 players for each position, when you're going to have good players there, it's really important you don't repeat the recent history of West Ham, which is give people game time irrespective of their performance. The whole purpose, I feel, there's 2 purposes to having a strong squad, 2 players for each position. Number 1, you're covered against injury. Number 2, you put absolute pressure on the person that's holding the shirt. And they have to perform. And if they don't perform, then the other guy gets a chance. So it would only be fair. He made a couple of noises. I don't like grunts and farts, by the way. Fullkrug said that he was all right for the moment. All right, I'm not totally fit. I don't mind not starting for the moment. There a lot is unsaid in that as well. There's a lot implied. Let's put it that way. I think he would have good grounds to say, well, hold on a second. You just paid whatever we paid, 23, 27 million pounds, depending on the website you read. I think he would have every right to turn around and say, well, hold on. If I can't get in after he's just played like that, fair enough. And I think you have to be fair. I think if then Fullkrug then has a stinker, then Antonio comes in. I think that's how it's going to have to work for the time being. Until
how come you're still picking Lucas Paqueta? Does that mean you think he had a good game against Aston Villa?
I don't. But he turned up in the big moments, didn't he? I think he was stinky. He was stinky. But the 2 moments he turned up, they didn't change the game because we still lost, but they could and should have changed the game for West Ham. He's one of those players who can be uninvolved and be a game winner. Antonio's not really. I'm sorry to say. He's almost got to be in full beast mode and be on form to be effective.
I'm just being mischievous because I was going to say, well, Souček turned up and won us a penalty, but you've not got him in the team, so I'll stop being mischievous.
No, we like it. We're not being. I don't care.
Fullkrug for me as well. Listen, how we play against Aston Villa, I think that's how we're going to play against Crystal Palace. Right? I think we're going to continue to see a lot of crosses. Fullkrug's the best striker to have on the pitch for that. And I know people will then stress, well, surely then you have Souček. No, because I think having Souček in the box means you're wide open and exposed in central midfield. I don't want that part of it happening. So Fullkrug in there. And also Crystal Palace looked weak, and Brentford found it very easy to counter-attack against Crystal Palace at the weekend. I thought that was when Brentford's only chances really came, was when they got forward in numbers quickly from a Crystal Palace attack. We've seen with Lopetegui, he does not mind bypassing that midfield, and Fullkrug's possibly the best one to do that in terms of bringing the ball down, giving it to Kudus and to Jared Bowen into getting that attack going. He ain't joining in. When you've got to turn and run 40-yard sprint, he's not going to cope with that part of it, but what he can do is set the 40-yard sprint up. And I think that's it. I think you're right with what he said. He said the right things, because he did go on and say, I want to play football. It was almost like a little bit of a warning to basically say, I'm fine for this game, but I'm not sitting on the bench for too long, and then I'm going to want to start. So I think Fullkrug has to come in for this one. It's only match day 2, Gonzo, but given that we lost the first week, we've got Crystal Palace we've got Manchester City next week. Feels like quite important to get something from this game.
Yeah, look, there's a pressure. There's a pressure really, because it's not beyond the realms possibility that we play 3 games and we have no points. That could happen. I think it's important that if that does happen, well, it's not important. You can do what you want, but I certainly wouldn't be overreacting myself, because I do think we're going to get better. I just think there's been so much change. It does take a long time to integrate, to get your methods over. I think there's, as I say, there's new habits that need to be implemented. There's old habits that need to be got rid of. It is a different style of play, as I mentioned when we did our Patreon player ratings. I thought we controlled a large part of that game. I thought and obviously you brought up the graphics as well afterwards when we were discussing it, and I did think from about 35 minutes to about 65 minutes, I felt we controlled the game, and we don't. I'm not used to that at West Ham. Even when we've won, we've had a lot of the times we've had so little possession, you'd struggle to say we controlled the game. But I felt we did. I thought there was a large chunk of that game where we controlled the ball, we controlled the game, we controlled the tempo. And I think that we'll only get more of that. I think that's going to be a feature under Lopetegui. And I think everybody's ethos is different, of course, for football. I think if you get periods where you can control the game, then you're not under the cosh as much as you were before. So, even if we can just control periods and patches of it, I think that'll be an improvement. I think we will improve. I think the players will understand more what Lopetegui wants. He'll have seen things in that game that he didn't like. Undoubtedly saw things in that game that he didn't like. I quite like the way he is with it. That's clear. He'll rectify those things. I think we'll be better, Geo. I really do think we'll be better. So, and that will continue. So to answer your question, yes, there is a bit of pressure, but I'm still adamant that we're probably not going to see the real image of what we're going to end up with until perhaps the end of December, beginning of the end of September, beginning of October.
Are you confident?
No, but I'm not crapping it either.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think the Crystal Palace part of it's helped. Andersen's off to Fulham, Guéhi. It's uncertain if he's going to play at this point. I imagine he is playing. However, Newcastle rock up today or tomorrow with a £70 million bid. Suddenly he's not playing at the weekend, and Glasner's preparations gone out the window. It's incredibly unlikely they'll have a replacement in for Andersen before 12 o'clock on Friday, which is the deadline to register in order to play against West Ham on Saturday. So it's unlikely they'll have a signing in. And even if they did sign on Friday, you've been at the club for 24 hours and you're going to start against West. There's an advantage there. So if Guéhi and Andersen are missing, there's almost no excuses to come away empty-handed at Selhurst Park. And I know it's new, and I know X, Y, Z. I know there's a load of reasons as to why West Ham aren't up and running yet. However, there's more reasons as to why you should be taking something away from Crystal Palace at this point. I'll be disappointed if we don't come away with that. So I am optimistic. Even though Palace lost, I still think they looked quite dangerous at times against Brentford, and they were just lacking that final ball or something. I guess you could say something similar to Aston Villa and West Ham last weekend too, that it just looked like they weren't quite ready. Yeah. So while I say I'm optimistic, I'm certainly not confident. Well, can I get any? I think we might have the same score prediction then here. Actually, can I get any final words from yourself, Gonzo, as well as that all-important score prediction, please?
Yeah, look, I think I mentioned that Lopetegui would have been looking at things and maybe there'll be seen some things he didn't like and areas for improvement. Of course, he's going to do that. I think for me, looking at it, I want to try and get Kudus more involved. He did grow into the game on the left-hand side, but it is my least favourite position for him. I think you limit. If he plays there all season, he won't match last season's goal tally.
And I don't think he matches Jared Bowen's either.
No. So it's a lot of goals to miss out on. So they need to find somewhere else for him to play in a team, as we've both done in our suggested teams. That would be an area of, not concern, but an area for him to deal with. I think he's going to have to really have a look at the positioning of those fullbacks and how he wants to play. And if they are going to be tucked in like that, then he's going to need to put a contingency there for this game to sort out that. But I wouldn't be surprised if those fullbacks tuck in and deal with those danger areas that you mentioned earlier on. But there's going to leave space out wide. So we've got to be careful with Palace's attack out wide. I think if we can do that, and I think certainly if they're missing both their first choice central defenders, I think we win this because I think we will improve. So I'm actually going for a 2-1 West Ham win here.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that. He's obviously had a little bit of a heads up about Crystal Palace because we played them pre-season twice.
Yeah.
Once we didn't get to see, but the game that we did get to see, that was how Crystal Palace played, and it wasn't the first team players, but they still beat us comfortably. But in terms of the way they played and the formation and the style, that was Crystal Palace. So Lopetegui's already had a bit of a training match ahead of this game, so there's a benefit there for him. He would have been watching. He claimed he was watching West Ham loads last season. Well, if he was doing that, he's watching loads of the Premier League, and if you're doing that, you've watched loads of Glasner at Crystal Palace last season as well. It's almost impossible not to come across Glasner's Crystal Palace once he arrived and took over. So there's no excuse not to be ready for this one. I think against Aston Villa, we signed Todibo a week ago. We signed Aaron Wan-Bissaka during the week. We've not had any new signings now. The squad from Villa to Crystal Palace is exactly the same. He's had plenty of time on the training ground with the new signings as well. And I'm not saying they should all be up and ready and settled in, but in terms of getting his tactics across to these players, that should be there. He should have them ready for this game. I expect to see a reaction from us. I want to see something better from us because whilst there was some positives from Villa, I feel like I came away with more questions than I did answers and positives. So I'm hoping we're going to flip that on the head on Saturday. We're going to come away with something from Selhurst Park, and I can feel a little bit happier on Sunday because to lose would put incredible pressure on us going in, and you just know there's going to be certain people that's going to have their knives sharpened, ready for Lopetegui. Just thinking, right, here you go, lose against City, you go into an international break, bottom of the league with no points. We've got our headlines for the 2-week period. Thank you very much. I'm going to say 1-1. I'm not confident going into this one, but there's an opportunity to get something at Selhurst Park, and I think we need to come away with just something. A point. It's not ideal, but the worst case scenario is now eliminated before we play Crystal Palace, which is I think is important. Right then, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've enjoyed this preview, please do drop a like on the video by clicking on thumbs up. Helps out the video and helps out the channel. Subscribe if you're new to Hammers Chat, and if you fancy getting involved with Match Bingo, please download the app. The link is in the description below. Myself and Gonzo will catch up with you on Saturday. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff, so we will be live at 1:55 on Saturday afternoon, right here with our build-up show, and we'll see you then.